Hi, Sheila. Can you hear me? Hi, Sheila. Can you hear me?
Hey, how are
Hi.
you?
You look at is that your beautiful home? This is my
Yeah, this is where my recording studio is set up now. So it's been it's been kind of
gorgeous.
nice. Thanks. I have a place in Palm Springs, so you can tell it's sunny outside.
Yes, like I hope you're somewhere warm. I live in
Yeah.
Aspen, Colorado, and
Oh, you do?
it's -2 outside.
Oh my God, you're
I know, I
kidding.
know. I don't,
Oh,
I'm very I sense that you're maybe an empath and I am one. So I don't do very well in cold weather.
yeah, I'm the same. I mean, I grew up in Utah, but I find it less and less enjoyable to go back and go skiing these days because I'm always like, oh.
It's like I'm 46 years old, but I feel like I need to go move to Florida and into a retirement
Exactly.
community.
Totally. That's so
Anyway,
true.
well, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, I'm
I
so happy
so
to join you.
appreciate it. And there will be a sound tech that will join us in about right before the show starts.
Okay.
He likes to cut it close, but just a little bit about how the show goes. It begins with an intro. I mean, I know that your radio and podcasts are your jam, so this is all in your territory. And there's some terrible music that plays, and I do an intro. It's bad. And
Sure.
then I introduce you with a little bio, and then we can just get to chatting. There is one
Awesome.
break after 26 minutes. And then we'll be on Facebook if that's okay with you. So
Sure.
we'll ask some fun questions that are non-related to our topic. And
Awesome.
then for our Facebook audience, and then we will have another 26-minute unit. And the last 6 or 7 or 8 minutes, I'll give you to promote yourself and Beyond
Oh,
Well,
that's so nice.
and how people can find you if they want you to speak, or
Oh,
if they want
great.
to, blah, 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 all of that,
Yeah.
just to plug yourself.
That's that's my least favorite part. So
Well, it's nice to leave,
yeah.
listeners with that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of listeners, and again, you know this well because you do this for a living, but they love a story.
Yeah.
Everybody seems to love a story.
Why do I have one, right?
You do, you do.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know this, but my mom died by suicide when I was 9.
Oh,
So I have a whole history of this. So
my God.
I also am QPR certified and
Oh,
am a
wow.
suicide advocate. And I'm here a Hope Center, which is a suicide prevention center here in Aspen, on
Oh,
the
that's
board.
fantastic.
Yeah,
Oh,
so suicide prevention is part of my life.
do you know when people tell me, "Oh, this is so emotional," I just learned that a friend died by suicide about an hour ago, so
Gosh.
I may be more emotional today than I normally would be. But when people tell me that their mothers or their fathers died when they were 9, I am so immediately sent back to the age of my daughter and the tenderness of my
Mhm.
daughter, and that in between age where you're not a child anymore and you're certainly not really a tween, and so you don't have the kind of willingness to let yourself like grieve like a baby would, right?
Totally. Yeah. And your daughter is so lucky to have you as a mother.
Mm.
When my mom died, it was 1985, and my dad got remarried, and we never talked about my mother again.
Oh my God.
And yeah, and so I'm Lady, and she was also Lady. And
My
so
God.
I had this very weird relationship. I was from New Orleans, and she had jumped off the Mississippi River Bridge. So everyone in New Orleans, she was a model and she was perfect and all these
Oh
things. But she had also taken, which was really interesting in your book, she had also taken on antidepressant about 3 weeks before she took her life, which they think might have been a contributing factor
yeah.
for her.
I mean, that now there is a big organization of people whose loved ones have died by suicide after taking antidepressants. I wish it had been around when it had happened to my husband. But because the data is so clear now around the kind of
Mhm.
akathisia that he suffered and so many people suffered, I think they're trying to move the pharmaceutical companies to a black box warning for people
Yeah.
who have never been diagnosed with bipolar to say, look, if you've ever had mood swings, if you ever went high and low, do not take this without going to see a psychiatrist, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it made your book, which was riveting, by the way, it made me think that maybe my mother had bipolar,
Well,
because
probably.
we would
Yeah,
never know, right? Of course,
that's right.
but
Yeah,
but it would have made sense that that would have triggered that type of reaction,
yeah,
because she may have had suicidal ideations, but they weren't as acute. I mean, it was kind of out of the blue. I mean, she
yeah,
had gotten a divorce and life wasn't going well,
right.
um, throwing yourself off a bridge is pretty dramatic for, a 43-year-old woman who otherwise is healthy. So,
Do you
yes.
recall, like, in your childhood, were there moments where she was just completely party person, so much fun, the life of the party, and then she would go darker and sort of, like, not come out of bed and not
Well, she definitely struggled with alcohol, which I think
Yeah,
in
hindsight.
retrospect
Yeah, of
was a self-medication, right, of some
course.
sort.
Yes.
And I stopped drinking like 4 years ago because I just had approached her age and I was like, I don't know what,
Oh my
I
god,
could have, but
what a
I
smart,
just
smart thing to do.
don't want that in my life if
Yeah,
I could have any of those things.
yeah,
And I was also getting a divorce and my life was taking on this sort of similar path in that way. And I was like, I just need to make sure that I'm healthy. But
yeah,
and it was a wonderful decision for me. But the for her, I don't remember her, to answer your question, being super manic. Um, I guess there were times. I mean, I think she was depressed because of alcohol and maybe just depressed overall.
yeah.
My dad describes her as a depressive personality.
Oh, wow.
So that could, be part of it. There was definitely fits of rage. I do remember that.
Well, see, what was fascinating is I think the whole understanding of bipolar is the crazy person who's out spending and who's out talking too rapidly. But bipolar 2 is fits of rage, impulsiveness, just that skin crawling irritation with people, just like,
Mhm.
it never really manifests in a lot of joy for the person who suffers from it. And that's why bipolar 2 is way less known than bipolar 1. But my husband was ultimately diagnosed with bipolar 2.
Yeah.
And I definitely saw more of that than I did the traditional bipolar.
Yeah. And then my friend that I was emailing you about, so I'm in YPO, which you may be familiar with,
Yeah,
which is like
of
a
course.
CEO organization. And
Yeah.
I sort of grin and bear it because I have a lot of I have some small businesses that qualify to me to be in
Yeah.
it, but it is an old boys club. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just a bunch of sorry rich men that
Yeah.
I'm in it, so I can criticize it, but it's not a lot of women anyway. There's a man in my group, and in my forum, we've all been in the same forum for 10 years, and we're basically like a little confidant group. And he has 5 children, and he's left his wife, and he is completely manic, like off the
Oh
charts manic.
no. Oh dear. Wow.
And hypersexual and all of the things you
Oh
described.
dear.
And actually, because of your book, but the interesting thing is he is adamant that nothing is wrong with him. Adamant. Um, and it's
Wow.
been an interesting journey because the men in my group have seen the hypersexuality almost as like funny.
Yeah.
And does that make sense? Like they don't
No.
necessarily equate it to bipolar, even though his father and grandfather had bipolar, and his grandfather died by suicide from bipolar.
God, that
It's
is
amazing. So when you talked about this non-attachment piece of
yeah.
them not associating themselves, like
Yeah.
he will defend his health to the end of the earth. And I think that's one of the things I'll ask you on the show is just, it's very tricky with people who believe they're fine and can
Yeah.
convince others that they're fine to an
Yeah.
extent, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think I was reading in the psychiatric journal about anosognosia and just how much more difficult it became during COVID because there was already this large swath of Americans who didn't want to believe in COVID, right?
Yeah.
Then the mental health declines associated with COVID, both the cognitive dissonance, both the depression, the anxiety, the casework on that is really pretty profound. They had this added thing of, now I have COVID, which I want to deny. And I also have a mental illness, which I want to deny. And so people are, coming to the emergency room for, I can't sleep and my stomach is upset, and really it's the cognitive impact of everything that's been happening the last 3 years that's really causing people to have this disconnect between how they're doing and
Yeah.
actually.
And
So
what's
I thought,
happening.
yes,
It's frightening.
exactly.
It's
Yeah.
super frightening.
Yeah.
And at least here in Colorado where we live, you can't commit someone without their consent. I don't
That's
think there's like
exactly
a
right.
5150 in the way,
Yeah.
if we're going to use Britney Spears as an example, you can't do
Yeah.
that here.
Yeah.
And so with this individual, it's been super tricky, but it's interesting for me to be able to see it, and in your book made it he suffers from every single thing. We went on a trip with him, and he's worth, millions of dollars, but he had packed his bags in trash bags.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And he had like papers just everywhere, like papers.
That sounds great. Do you remember in my book when my late husband took all of his bills in duffel bags to my home?
Yes. It's so similar. It was like you were writing about my friend, and it was so interesting. And the disorganization. So he has a plane, and we were supposed to get on the plane, and he forgot to call the pilots. So we arrive at the airport and there's no plane, it was that type of thing.
Oh my God.
Again, high class problems, if you will, but still sort of these symptoms of just like complete.
It doesn't kind of matter how much money you have when you're,
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. But it's easy, I think, for people to ignore almost the more money that you have. It's
That's
even
right.
weirder.
Do that is such a good point, because in Portland, we live in an apartment complex. It's a very sort of supposed to be kind of high-end apartment complex. And there was a woman who lived down the hall from me with her husband, beautiful woman, like had all of the signs of great impact by plastic surgery, and just, worked out 3 hours a day. And she was so sick. I mean, she was psychotic. She was, she would talk about aliens invading. I mean, she was like that kind of off the chart sick. And because she came from so much money, people just see her as being kind of flamboyant and eccentric, rather than being really in need of care. Now, the last time that we were there, her husband had said that she went on a big solo expedition, which I think means that she's probably in treatment finally.
Yeah, maybe. Let's hope.
But think about it, like wealth protects you from the ravages of houselessness. It protects you from the ravages of people who will physically hurt you.
Yeah.
There are so many protections built around wealth, right?
That's I mean, totally. I mean, I'm thinking through it, because it's this is when wealth becomes a bit of a curse, right?
Absolutely.
And he has a lot of money and is going through a divorce, just to use him as an example. And he has 5 kids. And we as a group wanted to send him to this place at Harvard that has a mental health component where they can do an evaluation, because he won't go anywhere that isn't, accredited or whatever. And he won't go because he's afraid that the diagnosis, whatever it might be, might harm the money and the custody. And so I was trying to say, but if mental health is the same as cancer to me. So you wouldn't go find out if you had stage 4 cancer because you would think it would affect your custody arrangement.
Right. I know. Isn't
and
that?
It is interesting. So this equation, if that makes sense, that the diagnosis of itself could somehow limit, his own access to wealth, or his own access to reputation, perhaps.
Yeah, well, his board would probably make him take a leave or invite him.
I mean, it will get there. It will all. I had to surrender this to the universe, that I've done what I can do, and I can't, unfortunately, can't commit someone if they're unwilling to be committed.
Right.
But it's interesting.
So, lady, I wanted to talk with you about how you originally got into this. Obviously, your mother's experience, but then when did you do the whole communications piece of it?
So I, let's see. So when I was 9, mom died by suicide. And then I set on a journey to become the most badass entrepreneur there ever was. So I went and got an MBA. I lived in San Francisco. I started Blue Jean business, which I had
Wow.
stores all over the country, and got into YPO and did all the things that, my father thought that were going to make me happy.
Yeah.
And I was taught by society would make me happy. And I found myself married to the best looking guy you've ever seen, having 2 beautiful children, moving to Aspen, Colorado, being CEO of a big company. And I was so desperately, Sheila, unhappy.
Oh,
And it wasn't unhappy like mentally health unhappy. It was like lack of fulfillment and purpose unhappy.
yeah. Yeah.
And I went to the Hoffman process in California, which I don't know if
Oh,
you're
yeah,
familiar with.
of
And
course.
then I just started on this spiritual path. And that was probably like 6 years ago, where I knew I had done these things in business. I ended up getting a divorce. I love my ex. He's just not going to be my spiritual
Yeah.
partner forever. Um, I knew I wanted to make a difference in the world. So I started thinking I would be a suicide prevention advocate. So I went out and filmed a
Wow.
speech and wanted to be a speaker and joined the board, and found very quickly that not too many people want to hear about suicide speeches. I mean,
Yeah. Do they?
yes,
Yeah.
perhaps some in a volunteer organization, but I wasn't going to make any money doing that.
Yeah.
I'm a single mom and was the breadwinner. So
Mhm.
to be able to support myself and my children, and they go to private school and all these things that probably could change, but to support my lifestyle, that wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, I can't do that, but what if I could get people upstream from suicide? So what
Yeah.
if I could teach the greater good
Yeah.
how to have agency when things aren't going well?
Yeah.
Because for me, happiness comes, as an inside job, and it
Yeah.
really and it comes from our ability to, calm ourselves, but really through habits.
Yeah.
And it was a way that I could speak to sort of the male community and the female community, because
Yeah.
happiness is this sort of like woo woo, like really esoteric metaphysical thing to most people.
Yeah.
But habits are some very concrete, and they're free, right?
Yes,
They're
of
they're
course.
miracle medicine, the good ones. And we all are either engaging in good ones or bad ones. And if we can
Yeah.
also equate them to behaviors. So I started a company, Habits for Happiness, and started doing one-on-one coaching, and then was asked by Voice of America to do this radio show. So
So cool.
I had Kimmy Culp on, who introduced me
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah.
And I've had some fun people on. Last week I had on Marcy Shimoff, who
Uh-huh.
is a wonderful miracle. She wrote Happiness for No Reason. She was in The Secret, and she's
Amazing.
really she wrote a chicken soup for the women's soul.
Oh, fantastic.
Um, and I had, who I had on 2 weeks ago that you would like is for yours is James Nestor, who wrote Breath.
Oh, I've interviewed him
And
not on my podcast, but on my radio program.
yeah, he's
Yes,
amazing.
it's really good.
The
Really
interesting about
good.
breath and the mental health component. Hey, Matt, is that you or Ryan?
Yep, this is Matt. Hi, lady. How you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing good. Doing good. All right. We'll do a quick mic check. Lady, go ahead and count back from 5.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right. Sounds good. And Sheila, hello. How you doing?
I'm well, thank you. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right. Perfect. Both side Atlanta clear. So we are good to go. All right. I guess we're good. If you're ready to start, I can get you started.
Yeah, I'm going to stream really quick on Facebook, and it takes a quick
Sure.
second. So it like doubled down, right? If I don't sign out of it immediately. 1 second.
It just asked for my
Permission.
yeah. And lady, would you mind if I recorded it on my end too? So
Of
we can
course.
our podcast? Could you
Yeah, love it. Please.
that?
So what do I have to do? Do I have to make you the
just
host?
go to participants and just share hosting it or make host, whichever.
I'm going to make you the host because technology.
Okay.
Okay. Technology hates me. I just want to, like, hates me. A lot of things love me, but technology and I are not friends.
Thank you. It's recording now.
Okay.
And we're also live, it looks like. So
Okay, wonderful. Okay, we're ready to go.
Ready to go? All right, I'm going to send the feed your way. Have a good show.
Thanks.
thank you.
Welcome to Habits for Happiness with Lady Fuller. The path to happiness is paved with healthy habits. We spend much of our lives searching for happiness when the key we're looking for is right there inside of us. We can discover that key through habit change, which you are about to learn about. Now, here is your host, Lady Fuller.
Welcome, everyone, to Habits for Happiness, the show where we discuss habits you can employ in your daily life to make you happier. Here on Habits for Happiness today to talk about the habit of reflective writing is Sheila Hamilton. Welcome, Sheila.
Hi, it's so good to be with you, lady.
Oh, thank you. Let me just introduce you because you are a superstar. Literally, Sheila is a 5-time Emmy Award-winning journalist. She's the author of the beautiful book, All the Things We Never Knew, Chasing the Chaos of Mental Illness, which I just finished, and it's powerful and gripping. Sheila is also the creator of Spotify's fastest growing mental health series, Beyond Well with Sheila Hamilton, and hosts the award-winning video series, Chasing Chaos. Sheila owns Beyond Well Media, whose priority is mental health awareness and well-being. Beyond Well Solutions provides media programming and managerial training for companies who seek to engage employees with pathways to better mental health. And if all of that were not enough, Sheila is a nationally recognized speaker on workplace well-being, mental health resilience, and how to build a mental health toolbox. So Sheila, tell us, what are you working on today? What's your newest, latest, and greatest?
Well, the most exciting thing I'm doing is talking with you, lady, because I've heard incredible things about your program and just you as a human being. So I try to focus on what's good right now, and I'm so happy to be with you. And the rest of the day, I have a new puppy here with me because my daughter came to visit with her brand new Bernedoodle. So hoping to have a little like casual Friday and spend some time with the puppy.
Oh, good. I hope we get to see him for the listeners. You won't be able to see him, but video watchers will be able to see him. Okay. So tell us about this habit of reflective writing. Why did you choose it? And tell us more.
I need to kind of back up into how I discovered it. And this was now almost 13 years ago. I was married to a builder designer, a beautiful man who I shared an incredible life with. And we had a really difficult patch in our marriage, probably 3 very tumultuous years where his behavior just seemed to be really unlike him. He would be impulsive. He started cheating on me. He was not running his business very well. He seemed to be going in these spirals where he would have times where he was very, very manic almost. And then he would have days when he would tell me it was very difficult to get out of bed. And through all of this, he really did not want to seek any help, lady. He felt very strongly that he was just encountering a rough patch in his life and that he'd be able to get through it. And then his dad died, which he had a really tumultuous relationship with. And he asked a friend of his who was a doctor for antidepressants. And I think it was probably 48 hours within the time of taking those antidepressants, he was hearing voices telling him to jump from the Vista Bridge. And we began this kind of spiral into what I can only call a full-blown mental health crisis. And my husband was hospitalized. And it was during that time that I began to see like I didn't have a very well thought out mental health routine for myself. And so I would just take the time to just sit and write actually what was occurring in my body, what was occurring in my heart, what was occurring in my thoughts. I'd never really had a strong journaling experience because I'm a professional writer. And when you're forced to write every single day, it's not the thing that you turn to relax. But it was during this period that I really felt as if I needed a place to get my thoughts outside of my brain, put them somewhere other than myself. And thank God I had this, because the day after my husband was released from psychiatric care, he went missing. And for 6 weeks, my daughter and I were in a state of total just not knowing. We didn't know if my husband had abandoned us, if he left on a vacation, if he was ever coming back. And it was a really like horrible winter, that winter in Portland, Oregon. And it was 2 weeks before Christmas when I got a phone call that authorities had found my husband's body, and he had died by suicide. And I think at the time it was so chaotic. It was so shocking to me that my husband, who was the most kind of peaceful, he hated guns, he hated anything to do with violence, would actually end his life this way, that I returned to this habit of just writing anything on anything I could find, a piece of paper, a book, a receipt, to be able to say, at this moment, here's what I'm thinking, here's what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what it did, lady, is that it allowed me to ground myself in a manner that wasn't otherwise available to me at that time. I didn't have the ability to go to therapy because he'd left us a mountain of debt, and I did not have the ability to seek outside help because I was still holding together a full-time career, a house, and trying to raise a daughter who didn't have her dad anymore. So I think that's a long way of saying writing saved my life, but it absolutely saved my life.
Yeah, I mean, I made a note when I was making show notes this morning, that writing for you and for others is healing.
It absolutely is healing. And now there's great science behind it. There's been enough data, both at Stanford and Harvard and some of the other great research labs, to show that expressive writing is as therapeutic as face-to-face counseling. It is as effective as EMDR. There is so much good data behind expressive writing now, but I was only doing it because it's the only way I knew how to actually calm myself down.
Yeah. And it comes through. So I listened to your book, and it was beautiful because I got to hear your voice, but also I'd have to stop at times because it was like reading a diary. It almost felt like reading or listening to a screenplay, because it was so detail oriented. You'd take a breath, or you'd cry, or something looked or smelled a certain way. It was, you were very, very descriptive. And so it occurred to me that you must have been taking notes along the way in some form.
Yeah.
And so what led you from gathering the notes to publishing a book to help others?
Well, I want to just describe the weeks and months, and you're a suicide loss survivor, right? And it is a very different place to be in when you've lost someone to suicide. You don't have the casseroles arriving on your door. You don't have people reaching out and telling you beautiful stories of your loved one, because people they're so stigmatized by suicide. They're so paralyzed by what to do next, that I was in a very fragile place in terms of my own mental well-being. And so I was working at a radio station at the time. I would get up, I would do my shift, I would come home, drop my daughter at school, and then I would lay by my big lab in this windowed office, and I would cry, and I would get up and I would write. And then I would lay on the floor and I would cry, and I would get up and I was write. It was very therapeutic. And it was only several years later when I started to really do the investigating and joined some mental health boards and became a real advocate, that I understood just how profoundly the entire country was suffering from mental health conditions. It used to be, we would say 2 in 5 people will experience a serious mental health crisis. Now that COVID has happened, I would say we could probably honestly say all of us have experienced a serious
Yes.
mental health decline. I don't think that anybody who has really paid attention to their interior would say, no, it was my best time.
Yeah, which brings up this idea of mental health on a spectrum, which we can
Right.
circle back to. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I really do believe that what I was doing was this very, I think, almost ancient DNA that we have in our system around expressing. I mean,
Mm.
people used to do it by sitting around the fire after trauma and saying, the tiger chased me and here's how I got out. And then the tiger did this and then I did that. And because we are now at the point where we are so evolved as humans, spend so much time in our bubbles, in our computers, in our small groups, expressive writing for me has become this way of really getting into the details of my life, of accessing an interior place that I might not otherwise make time for. And I think that that's the reason so many clinical labs are beginning to look at it as well, is because it's very cost effective.
Mhm.
Doesn't take a
Yeah.
lot of medication. You don't have all of the side effects of all the other drugs. And for most people, even if you don't consider yourself a writer, you can learn to do it.
Yeah. And so, as we were talking before the show, espouse all habits, all good habits, or if we like to say good, healthy habits, to be miracle medicine because they are free.
Yeah.
And we don't realize that we have so much more free tools at our disposal than, we know. So if someone wanted to start a habit of reflective writing, where would you guide them? What would you say?
So honestly, I think one of the most handcuffing ways to go about this is to think, okay, I have to go to the store and buy a journal with a beautiful pen. And every day I have to chain myself to a chair with this desk, hoping that something comes up that's brilliant, right? That's not the point. The point is when you are triggered, when there's an experience that you are feeling in your body, where you are overwhelmed, identify it first where it comes from. What is my stomach feeling? What is my heart rate like? What does it remind me of? Is it a hummingbird? Does it feel like when my cat jumps up on the side of my comforter? What is happening in my body that I can describe right now? Go through every single bodily sensation. What do I think that is attached to? What experience has provoked that? How much of that experience am I willing to actually put down on a page? What happened? In what order? What did it smell like outside? What did it look like outside? How much heat was there in the day? Who was around? What colors were the cars? This type of trauma therapy, especially if you can do it with a guided principal, somebody who can help you through it, is so effective for people with PTSD who have suffered sexual assault, who have suffered all kinds of really terrible tragedies. It's very expensive to do with a person who can guide you, but there are fabulous books that can just sort of take you through the process I've just described around describing your internal state of being and then describing your external triggers. And you will see the more granular you can get in describing these events, the more heat you take off the experience every single time you do it.
Yeah.
So we know that in trauma therapy, one of the most effective things you can do is exposure therapy. You go to the site again, again, until it loses that ability to wake you in the middle of the night with your heart pounding, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's taking your power back almost.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
It is exactly right. It's understanding it in a new way. For me, it was reclaiming the narrative of what had happened in my life from a victim status to something that I could actually become powerful around. For my daughter, it was reframing the shameful experience of her father's death into something that could provide her with a way to be an advocate, to help other people. I think writing is the most powerful and underused mental health tool we have. And so
I
you can
love
see
that.
I'm such a huge advocate for it because it's inside every one of us. As long as we just get a computer, a pen, even a pencil, I don't care if it's a crayon. Sometimes I use my makeup pencil for it.
And you can throw it away. Like it doesn't need to
Exactly.
live, live
No.
on in any form. But I have this vision of you going around your house and picking up Post-it notes and putting them all together to make this book. How is that process?
Well, lady, I keep coming back to how fragile my own mental health had become, because we know trauma does that to people.
Mhm.
And I needed to remind myself of the basics of just living. So I would have Post-it notes: brush your teeth. Sophie needs lunch. Put vegetables in the lunch. Pick up the dog poop. Like those very, very common things that we have to remind ourselves to do in order to bring ourselves back to some sort of equanimity. And I began then going beyond the basics to look up at the sky.
Mm.
Remember in this moment that you have resilience and you can choose it. Make sure to remember that you are worthy of this life. I began writing myself encouraging notes, as if
Yeah.
I was outside of myself, kind of encouraging this person to go ahead and recover from this horrible trauma. And those notes became such a guidebook for me in putting this book together, because I didn't want the book just to be about my experience. I wanted this book to resonate with anyone who has cared for someone who has a mental illness.
Yeah, I
It's-
mean, the book resonated so completely for me in so many ways. And for listeners that don't know, I lost my mom when I was 9 to suicide. So I could understand your daughter's point of view, right? So I was her age. Your daughter was 9 or around 9 when your late husband died. So I resonated deeply, but I loved how in the book that you interspersed the sort of mental health world and bipolar and things to look for and suicidality in with your story, right? It was beautifully woven between. So there was little spurts of it. And, there may be people listening who have a loved one they're worried about, or they might have someone in their life they're worried might have some sort of mental illness. Could you just speak to that a little bit? What do people who are listening who may be worried about themselves or others, what tools would you give them to look for and seek for help?
lady, I think it's a travesty that we don't, from the time we're grown up, educated in K through 12, that we don't actually know the warning signs for a mental health decline. I mean,
I
I think
agree.
it's
Or good
so-
habits,
Exactly. We learn all of these equations that we'll never
Yeah.
use again in our lifetimes, but that happens, to somehow get by our educational system. But the first thing I would do is just to Google what are the signs and symptoms of a mental health decline. And if you know a little bit of it, you can get more specific. What are the signs and symptoms of depression? What are the signs and symptoms of anxiety? But there are some common ones that everyone should know. If your sleep routine is really erratic, it is likely that you're suffering from a mental health issue.
So describe erratic for us, because
Erratic means that if you've always been able to sleep 7 to 9 hours a day, and now you're waking up 3 times a night, and you're having panic attacks in the middle of the night, if you are having trouble staying awake during the middle of the day, if you are up perseverating at 2 o'clock in the morning and you can't get back to sleep till 3, and then you're oversleeping your alarm,
Mhm.
that is something that's amiss in your mental health. I mean,
And I just want to point out too that your husband also, your late husband, had the phenomenon, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, of sleeping during. Was he sleeping during the day and awake and being awake at night? Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
His sleep got so irregular. I didn't even recognize it as the same person.
Okay.
The second thing is, and this is really hard to determine because COVID upset so many people's eating habits, but eating is a really good sign of how you're doing. So if suddenly you have become completely uninterested in food, you just can't find an appetite, that's a very strong warning that something's really wrong with your mental health. Conversely, if you find yourself binge eating or eating for comfort or constantly feeding yourself because you're so anxiety ridden, that's also a sign. If you're very restrictive about only eating certain colors and certain types of foods at certain times, that's also a time. A very dear friend of mine just disclosed to me that she wakes up sometimes surrounded now by cookie wrappers, and she is night eating without even realizing it. There have been so much increase in eating problems because of quarantine.
Yeah,
Because
I've noticed that a lot with my coaching clients as well.
yeah, people they have so little control, and they're so close in proximity to food that food became the way of coping for many people. If
Yeah.
we move to sort of mood regulation, if you used to be what we would consider kind of an optimistic person, and you find yourself unable to turn off the television around world events, unable to find any perspective of joy, unable to think beyond what is pleasurable in your life today, this is a strong warning sign that you should seek out mental health care. The other thing that people don't really realize is sensitivity to light, sound, the irritability factor of mental health decline is often overlooked. But if you're a person who used to love being around people and now you find they just bug you and you snap at people constantly and you don't have any bandwidth to be able to perform the way that, that the structures that you used to, that's also a very big trigger warning. There's a whole list of things that are major fire alarms for mental health. And most people walk around not understanding, oh my gosh, this is a mental health symptom.
Yeah. And one of the things is as you describe those things, I think everyone listening can identify with at least one of them, especially during the past 2 years of this pandemic. And so I'd like for you talk about this in the book, and I've watched other interviews with you where you've talked about it, but there is a spectrum of mental illness. I love that you said in an interview that I listened to that it's not us versus them. And I think it's really easy for people to think, okay, I'm not sick, I'm well, and other people are mentally ill, and create sort of this boundary or divide. But we're all on the spectrum, right?
That's
and we've all seen it in ourselves during quarantine. So tell us more about that.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I like to say we're along a spectrum of mental health, and that those who have proper housing, and they have proper food and proper shelter, and they have relationships with people that love them, and they have a coach like you who can help them think about their interior, those are people who are probably doing pretty well on the mental health spectrum. But say you're going through a divorce, lady. Say somehow your business turned topsy-turvy and you were having trouble meeting your invoices at the end of the month. Then say something happened to your beloved dog or cat. Then say war breaks out, as it has, and a pandemic. You know what? You might not be on that, wonderful scale of mental health anymore. Now, for people who have had trauma in the past, for people who don't have housing, they don't have any ability to make ends meet for themselves, they're further along on a spectrum of mental unwell, right?
Yeah.
And so I want everyone to understand our brains are just another organ. They're the most important organ in our body, but they can be stressed. They can get toxic burnout. They can get very, very sick. They can also get better with daily habits, support, medication, the right kind of medication, therapy, writing. And so I feel like we're constantly kind of moving along this scale of where am I today? What is my check-in? If I had to say on a scale of 1 to 10, where am I today?
Yeah. And in your book, you write about this amazing concept, which I loved this analogy, that our brains, we need to treat them like an organ, just like our liver or our hearts, and care for them. And you equated this to, if you drink too much alcohol, you damage your liver.
Yeah.
And if you do certain things, you will damage your brain, or you're not taking care of this organ. And I loved that. And if you want to tell listeners a little bit more about what you meant.
Yeah. I mean, when my daughter went into middle school, there were a lot of kids who were already doing drugs and drinking. And I said, look, this is a choice that every person has to make for themselves. But we have to understand that in our family, our brains are really, really sensitive to dopamine and serotonin. We might have too much, sometimes we might have too little. What you don't want to do is treat your brain in a way that makes it like you could be vulnerable just because of a habit that you choose to pick up. So when people decide to drink, they got to know that the depressive properties of alcohol are really going to impact their serotonin and their dopamine. They have to truly understand that if they're going to do any kind of Red Bull or any kind of amphetamine type thing, they could be pushed over into a slightly more manic phase. And for people who have proximity to bipolar disorder, depression, or anxiety, I just say use those substances with so much caution, because it is really powerful stuff on brains, especially those brains that have a genetic propensity to mental illness.
Gosh, that's amazing. And I think it's just amazing analogy for us to know that brain care, I'm not sure if that's a term, but I'm going to make it one. Brain care is important. And we talk about mental well-being, but we don't really talk about taking care of, we talk about taking care of, again, of all these different organs, our hearts, our livers, our kidneys, our intestines, our gut, but we don't really talk about taking care of our brains. And it's the key. It's one of the keys here. So we're going to hang tight and go to break. So everybody hang on. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the light after the dark. And we're here with Sheila Hamilton. Thanks so much, you guys. We'll be right back.
All right, perfect. Good job. All clear.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so we're here on with Facebook. So you get to answer my fun questions, which are nothing to do with mental health. Okay, ready?
Awesome. Yeah.
Okay. So if I was going to give you a superpower, any superpower, which one would you have?
Oh, I wish I could sing. I mean, I wish I could sing. I love to sing in the car. I love to sing in the shower. I cannot hold a tune. I'd give anything to sing.
Yeah. I mean, if I sang, everybody would stop listening, but yes. That's a good one. No one's ever said that. We get a lot of flying.
No, I fly in my dreams. I don't need to do that. I'm really interested in singing. I wish I could.
Yeah. Well, you can always take lessons outside of your comfort zone. That's where the growth exists.
Yeah.
So the next one is, if you could go anywhere tomorrow with your family on vacation, where would you go?
Oh my gosh, I'd love to go to Antarctica.
Really?
I'm one of those people that's super concerned about warming of the planet. And I'm very interested in how the ecological differences are affecting the people and the wildlife and the planet life there. And I would love to see it now before it really, really changes. I mean, it already has undergone such drastic changes, but I'm super interested in that area of the world.
Yeah, it's supposed to be amazing. And I think on Apple News, I don't watch the news, but I do look at it on my phone occasionally. They just discovered Shackleton's ship.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Off the coast.
I want to go to Antarctica and go on Shackleton's ship.
Well, it's underwater. So you might have to go in a submersible, but you probably could and see it. But yes, apparently the trip to Antarctica over Drake Bay is quite rough.
Oh, wow.
So that's the only thing that's kept me from going, besides, it's freezing and I don't like the cold.
Yeah.
Okay, languages. If you could speak a new language, what would it be and why?
I wish, I'd paid better attention in high school Spanish. I love the Spanish language. I love everyone. Every single time I travel to Mexico, I love the culture, the families, the way people treat one another. And I just wish I were fluent in Spanish. It would be wonderful.
It is. It's a wonderful language and spoken so much here in the US and in Mexico. I agree. I just spent a couple of weeks in San Miguel and I was like, remind me why I don't live here. It's very healing. It's a very healing place, as is a lot of places in Mexico. It's beautiful. And we're very lucky to have it as our neighbor.
Back in about 10 seconds.
Okay, so we'll wait for the 10 seconds till we get back.
Okay.
Those are my fun questions.
Oh, that's awesome. So can you go back on Facebook and watch this?
Yeah, I can. I'm going to also send you a YouTube link of it edited also. So you get a video.
You're listening to Habits for Happiness. To reach the show today, call into 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. Now, back to our program, and here again is Lady Fuller.
And we're back. Thanks everyone for hanging in there. We're here with Sheila Hamilton, who is a guru of mental health, but also has written this beautiful book about bipolar and her late husband's suicide, and is here to share with us her bright light. And I'm so thankful you're here today, Sheila. Thank you for being with us.
Appreciate it.
So, you know, I think one of the things we talked about before the break is brain health and taking care of your brain and having a barometer for understanding that our wellness or mental wellness is on this more fluid sort of scale, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you could just tell us a little bit about the light after the dark. So for you personally in the book, you describe in detail, harrowing detail. I mean, it was hard to read and listen to, because you underwent such a dark night of the soul after, before and after you lost your husband, and really picked yourself up out of nothing. So tell us about your journey from going from the dark to the light, because I think this is the part about hope in mental health that's so important for those listeners and for everyone to know.
You know, I think, Lady, probably the guiding principle that I used was that a lot of my husband's problems, a lot of his decline was brought on because of shame and secrecy. He was so ashamed of suffering from a mental health issue that he didn't want help, that he didn't want anyone to know what he was going through. And that secrecy, even in our own household, caused way more suffering than we needed. And so I wanted to kind of shift the paradigm to say no more. We're going to be open, we're going to be honest, and we're going to be vulnerable about what we're going through. And so, I mean, much to my daughter's dismay, I was very open from the very beginning, including telling her precisely what had happened to her father, not in great detail, but to let her know that he had died by suicide, that we were going to do our very best to be really good advocates for people who suffered from mental health declines, and to also say, for us going forward, we have to be really cognizant of how we're treating ourselves. So that means, you know, the basics of physical health are the underpinnings of mental health, right? Proper nutrition, proper exercise, and then you get into this sort of social, societal, spiritual realm where it's about connection. It's about, are you opening your heart to love? Are you opening your heart to being cared for? Are you opening your physical presence to being willing to go on? And I had to actually go through a process of asking myself, is this something you want to do? Are you here for it? And, you know, I think for any suicide loss survivor out there, you understand what I'm talking about. It is a questioning that is so profoundly scary. And once you come to your conclusion that you are going to live, I think it is like the most liberating time, because it's almost like you get to reorganize yourself. You get to say, here's how I'm going to do this differently. And so the principles of spiritual openness, and also of kind of saying, I'm ready to be in this world and accept love and be a part of the human race going forward. And then I think just the habits that you talk about every single day, Lady, getting out in nature, convening with something bigger than ourselves, caring for your pets in a way that is really profoundly intimate, and knowing how much they depend upon you and they bring joy to you. Making sure that you have someone in your life that you intimately trust, someone you can tell every single secret to. I don't really believe that it has to be a therapist. I think it can be a spiritual leader. I think it can be a best friend who listens without judgment.
It can also be, I think, an inanimate object. I talk to my dog a lot, or the wall, you know. They listen very well.
Yeah, but I have a team of 4 doctors who consult on our program, and one of them said something I thought was quite profound. She said, "I think we could eliminate half of our mental health declines in the country if people did 3 things. If they had a person they talked to every single day without judgment or without any kind of secrecy, if they moved their bodies in a meaningful and joyous way. And that doesn't mean punishing exercise, that means rolling on the floor with your dog, dancing to music, gardening, stuff that actually brings your brain joy. And then the other one is proper nutrition, because we do know so much more right now about the gut brain axis and how all those serotonin stores are actually beginning in the gut. We used to think it was the brain. Now we sort of know, like, oh my gosh, all of this traveling along the vagus nerve, this comes from your microbiome. So take care of your gut.
Yeah. So brain care is gut care.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's absolutely the truth.
Yeah. So just to review, so finding someone who can listen to you or expressing yourself, and that could be in reflective writing, right?
Yes, that's right.
Moving your body.
Yes.
And healthy eating.
Yes.
I love
and of
that.
course, that comes along with, proper hydration and proper sleep and all of those other things. I just really come back to those 3 tenets every day, because if I don't do those things every day, I'm a really sensitive person and I can get knocked off pretty quickly. And I'll always ask myself, what have you eaten today? Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, totally. So I am a huge proponent of the morning routine. So I ask everyone, do you have one? And what is it?
Yeah, I do actually. When I was starting my business, I used to get up and immediately check my phone. And I saw a really amazing study out of Harvard, just talking about the number of interruptions that you have on your brain. And that is answering email, that's answering DMs, that's answering texts, answering Slack, is so bad for our brain focus and productivity. I don't pick up my phone now, except for anything but pure enjoyment, like maybe look at the monkeys on TikTok, or something.
Cat videos. Yeah,
exactly.
Something.
But I do try to sit in just, I don't even call it meditation anymore because I'm such a horrible meditator, but I do sit in mindfulness and reflectiveness for about 10 minutes upon waking. It's a game changer. It is. It allows that time for gratitude. It allows that time for reflectiveness about what is the most important priority of the day. It allows you to sort of set what your consciousness is going to be about and what you're going to be focused on. And I'll tell you, one of the worst things we do as humans is get into that habitual, I'm going to the coffee machine, I'm opening the phone. That is where mental health declines happen. I
know my coaching clients, I'll say, go tell me all about what you're doing. They're like, well, I wake up and I look at my phone and then I turn on the news. I was like, eek, stop right there. The news needs to go. The phone needs to go in the bathroom. There's like 97% of Americans look at their phone within 1 minute of waking.
Yeah.
And I always say that's a lot of people to invite into your bedroom before you've put your clothes on.
I also just, I really love the cognitive therapy tools. I use them all the time. And one of those that I use the most, even when I'm on Zoom calls, is just stop. I'm sure your listeners are familiar with it, where you stop, you take a deep cleansing breath, you observe your surroundings. My butt is in this chair. I love ladies' high top pony. It's so cute. You observe your surroundings. You actually interact with your surroundings, and then you proceed. And I like to say it's just like refreshing my brain screen a few times a day. You can do it without people even noticing that you're doing it. And it is so helpful as a tool to reset yourself and your brain.
Yeah, it is hard. I mean, for those people listening, it's hard to do Zooms all day, or it's hard to be on meetings all day. And we have definitely, for those people that work in a corporate setting or even a setting from home, we're on Zoom all day, and it is really hard to focus and listen, right? Listening is something that is a lost art. I have a whole book in me about listening, but the idea is that to use your stop principle helps us refocus so that we can remain open and expanded and listening to those people in our lives, which builds beautiful connection. Back to your point. Anyway, I interrupted your morning routine, so go back.
No. I think that if you get that finished, then you'll notice that when you're sitting on the couch and you're giving your dog his morning massage or his, cuddles, you'll be much more present for the experience. So what I like to think about is, if I start that way, then can I build on the next experience, also being really fully present to that moment? When I sit with you, I really want to be fully present to your ideas, to your questions, to what you have to say. Can you continue to build on all of those things and stop this habitual patterning that we have as humans that takes us away from our beauty and our spirits?
Yeah. And it steals our own time.
Yes.
Right. So it's this like concept, like if we're not present, then we're missing our lives, and we only have so much life.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what you learn being a survivor of, I think for every person that dies by suicide, there's 7, I mean, the data changes, but 7 to 8 or 6 to 8 severely impacted survivors.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. That you realize how precious life is. And anyone who's undergone a terminal illness or a near-death experience knows this. And so things start to shift, right, of how we spend that time. Because if we spend our whole time on Zoom calls and spaced out and thinking about, what we're going to eat for lunch or whatever, then we might as well be asleep.
Yeah. I also just really think Zoom has been particularly difficult, especially for people who, like if you didn't feel okay about your appearance before the pandemic, imagine what Zoom did for us. It's like,
it's not good.
Right. And so it's just like not really fair if you don't really like looking at yourself. And I read this study around mirror fatigue, especially for women, how devastating Zoom has been because they don't like seeing themselves. You might swipe your mascara on in the morning but you're not a person who loves looking at your image. And so Zoom has been really, really hard on America's workers, especially females. So I always say, as part of your negotiation with your managers, explain whether you have mirror fatigue. Talk to them about what it means to have to look at your image constantly and say, can I have this time off? Can I do at least 2 meetings a day with it off? Can I walk in nature while I listen to the call? Can I make sure that I'm just lying on the floor, breathing deeply while I listen to the call? There's all kinds of creative things that we can do so that we're not suffering because of this. And Zoom, I hate to say I love you, Zoom. I hate you, Zoom.
Yeah, totally. I mean, they should definitely have a setting where you can't see yourself because,
that's right.
And maybe there is, and technology hates me, as I've told you before, but I actually meet with my coaching clients on the phone, which sounds incredibly old school.
Yeah.
But I believe that there's so much intonation that comes through the phone. And I prefer that my clients go for a walk.
Yeah.
While I'm talking to them, or if I'm doing a meditation exercise, they close their eyes and aren't worried about what they look like. And it's funny because I also run a small business and there'll be Zoom calls and I'll say, like, what happened to the conference call? Like, I love a good conference call.
Right. Exactly.
Can we bring it back?
Yeah. We should be bringing it back for sure.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with a good conference call.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us more about like what's next. Do you have another book in you or what?
Yeah, I have I've really been thinking, lady, about the importance of this idea of building mental health habits and the ability to kind of make sure that your kids have emotional intelligence as their guiding principle more than anything else. And this really is as a result of the recent data, because in Mental Health America's most recent poll, the number of kids who reported active suicidal ideation, and that is kids who not only are thinking about suicide every day, but they actually have a plan, was so devastating to me that I just felt like maybe my efforts need to be more downstream, more around prevention of these kind of lifelong feelings of low self-esteem and the ability to not be able to cope with our own interiors. Maybe I need to do more for kids. And so that's what I've been talking with my editor about. I feel like there is a real desperate need for this kind of programming to be suited for kids in their language and their ability to understand. It's kids really got hit hard by COVID.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of parents are like, whatever, it's over. What do you mean? But it was almost 3 really important developmental years for young kids when they were finding out about where they fit in society and their friends groups and who they are and what they love. And that was sort of stopped short. And so I think there's probably more of a need for this kind of information now than ever before.
Yeah, I mean, so many things are coming up for me, but one is that, it's not over. So I think actually this time of coming out of COVID could be more precious and sensitive
Mm,
and tender than the past 2 years were,
yeah,
because it's not, you don't have PTSD until you come home from battle.
that's right.
Like when you're in the fight, you're just in survival mode.
That's right.
But all of the feelings come to the surface when we're back into safety.
Yeah.
So if we're coming back into a safe zone, I actually think us as a community in America, we're much, or in the world, we're much more at a tender place now than ever before.
I totally
And
agree. Yeah.
and I was on a board meeting for a suicide prevention center I'm a part of locally here in Aspen, and the data came out that in our valley, the suicidality of under 11 has gone up 137%.
Yeah, those are the statistics that I'm reading too. It's really very concerning to me. And what's happening is now that life is somewhat returning to normal, everyone is expecting kids to be caught up, to be on task, to be great students again. And actually, they're just dealing with the trauma of everything that they've gone through. And, they call mental health always the long tail of whatever it is. Mental health, the long tail of wars, the long tail of pandemics. This tail is very long and it's really devastating. And I'll honestly, every corporate client I deal with, we have Q&A sessions. Most people are most concerned about their kids.
Yeah.
They see
So
how it
interesting.
impacted their children, and they're really worried about whether or not they're going to be okay.
Yeah, and obviously we just had this recent death at Stanford where your daughter, I don't know if she's still there, but she attended university, and that brought up the stats that and you might know the more present stats that between 18 and 24, it's something like 9 in 10 have thought about suicide in the past year or something, and I don't know what the exact stats are, but alarming statistics.
It's super alarming. And there's also such an interesting part of the perfectionist ideal that Stanford puts out there that's also really problematic. We have to stop looking at kids as producers and as, our brilliant minds, and allow them to be kids. We really got to stop this idea that we're creating this superhuman race of thinkers and doers and beers, and let them be human beings.
Yeah, totally.
I like to say I'm being a human being and not a human doer right now. Thank you. Let me sit on the couch and look out the window.
Yes, I'm actually one of those moms. I'm known for, allowing my kids to rest. And it's interesting, the more I see them rest, because my children, like all children, certain places are overprogrammed, right? They live here in Colorado. They spend a lot of time outside doing activities. And I find that when they're not in school, they're doing physical activities. And so they're tired. Yeah. And a friend of mine once said, well, your son, he's always doing things. And one day he just kind of couldn't do anything else. He was so tired. And so I let him hang out at home. And I just thought, I'm going to let him have a mental health day. He's 12. And the interesting thing was he watched his iPad a little bit, and then I had him do some chores, and then he was super bored. And I was like, I'm just going to let him be bored and see what happens. And the next thing I knew, he was out in the backyard on the play structure, which is for toddlers. And so he's 12, and he built a ski jump with some pallets, and he was piling. And the thing is, it made me think this is what children need more of, right? He needed to just use his brain in sort of a non-linear or fashion for productivity or goal orienting. It was just to do whatever he wanted to do.
Yeah. I will say, when parents say, how did your kid get into Stanford? I said, well, the story I always come back to is she was 4 years old and we were rushing off on a Saturday morning to another soccer game, followed by piano and something else. And she announced to me that she was overscheduled. And from that time on, we stayed home and we read books. She
Mhm.
picked up the guitar on her own, taught herself how to play guitar. She became extremely creative. And I would say the creative skills that come from allowing boredom and time alone are probably the most important factors in allowing kids to grow expansive brains.
I love
And
it.
so
Boredom is the
I am not the overdoer mom at all. And she's doing just fine.
It sounds like it. So tell us, if listeners want more of you, how can they find your radio show, your podcast? If they want to book you for speaking or corporate events, let us know.
Oh, yes, please. We're at beyondwellmedia.com. And as I say, I have a team of 4 doctors. We do managerial trainings, and we also do a whole library of podcast platforming for mental health, well-being, and working in a very changed environment in the workplace right now. And then my book is available at all bookstores. I like indie bookstores. If you have one near you, it's called All the Things We Never Knew. And I'm most just happy if people follow me on social media. I'm under Sheila Hamilton on everything, Twitter, Instagram, even TikTok. I give a few mental health tips every now and then. So I hope that you can find me that way.
Awesome. Awesome. And please pick up the book and check out the podcast. The book it really did change my life. I'm so blessed to have encountered you and to have read it. And as we reach the end of the show, you can continue the conversation on my Facebook group at Habits for Happiness. And remember, everyone, the road to happiness is paved with healthy habits. Please listen next week for another riveting conversation on a powerful habit that can change your life. And thank you, Sheila, for being here.
Thank you, Lade. It was such a pleasure.
All right, good job. Good show. We're all clear.
Thanks. Thank you, Sheila, so much for everything.
I really enjoyed it, lady. You're a great interviewer. It was so fun. I hope when I come to Aspen, I get to meet you in person.
Yes, totally. I was actually thinking I wanted to have a happiness summit in Aspen with all the people who've been on the radio show.
Oh, what an amazing idea.
Yeah, because everyone to get together and talk about this brain care idea that I just think I quoted. I think I might patent.
Brain care, hurry and get that patent.
Really. I know, exactly, brain care. Because there's just, everyone has these amazing, the beautiful thing about Zoom is that we're able to connect with sort of other high frequency humans like yourself. And just the idea to get all these high frequency people in the same place to talk about brain care would be amazing. And happiness.
I love it. I love Aspen and I love to ski. So
I know. And thank you so much. And I will send you all of the links to everything else. And I'm also going to send you a link. I'm working on a documentary about suicide.
Oh my gosh.
And I would love to connect you with, you may already know her, but Dr. Jen Ashton.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you know her already.
AASP conferences.
Okay, good. Because she's a wonderful mentor of mine. I interviewed her for the documentary, but
wonderful.
You all have a ton of similarities. So, and thank you for sharing your light with me. I so appreciate it. And the world is very lucky to have you in it.
Thanks, lady.
Yeah. Take care. Have a beautiful day.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.